So, David, I don't know if you remember me. I worked with Dennis Allen.
Yes, 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 I
I
remember.
was, yeah, and
Yeah,
also back in the day, I worked in the county planning department at the counter.
I, for,
Um,
I forgive you.
yeah, yeah, I got out of there. Um, but I used to be the one that would bring you your Christmas presents every year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
David, can you center your image more in the middle of the screen? Yeah, that's better. And
Wait.
yeah. Are you sitting down?
I'm sitting down.
Okay.
Maybe put a book underneath your computer screen so it comes up a little.
Um, yeah, good idea.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, I like the hat. The hat's good.
Yeah, we'll get the hat.
There you go.
Rather than,
Nice.
rather than the bad haircut I gave myself.
Well, mine's all just pulled back because it's gotten so bad. But yeah. How are you, David?
I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you for agreeing to do this today. It's
What did
really
I
fun.
agree to, actually? What did I
Sorry?
do, actually? What did I agree to, actually?
Oh, okay. So since you are an emeritus member of AIA,
Means old.
pardon?
That means old.
Tara, what does that mean?
Yes, it means over 70. But we
Okay.
know you're a young 70, David.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So
Okay.
what AIA is wanting to do is to capture the lives and careers of key architects that have been a part of the Santa Barbara community. And so you are one of those people. And what we are doing is recording our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of today is to find out about what was your career and what inspired you in your career, what you feel have been your accomplishments in your career. But in doing that, it's also getting to know you a little bit as a person and how you got to be an architect. So I think that's the nature of our conversation that we want to do today. I don't know, Tara, if you have anything that you would want to add to that.
No, just we feel like, you know, there's a lot of value for our younger members and everyone else just to hear, you know, the history of the architects in Santa Barbara and the buildings that you've been involved in. And so, yeah, I'm actually not going to stay on the call. Karen's going to continue on. So,
Okay. Very good.
All right.
So
we'll have fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you just
Okay, so you're going to hit record, huh, Tara?
Yeah, I've been recording.
Oh, didn't know that. Okay.
You can start again by, you know.
Okay, good. So, David, in order to get to where you are today, it's important to understand a little bit about your background. So, if you would be willing to share just a little bit about you as a person, even back from the very beginning, as far as where were you born, a little bit about your childhood. I know you have a brother, Sid, right? So a little bit about that, and then we can get into more of the other parts of this. So who are you, David Goldstein?
Well, very briefly, I was born in Rochester, New York, and I have two brothers and one sister. I'm the oldest boy. My sister is the oldest child, and we're spread out all over the country, except my brother Sid and I are here in the San Ynez Valley. My other brother is in Des Moines, Iowa, and my sister is in, where is she now? Manassas, Virginia. And my parents lived, recently passed away. They lived in Rochester their whole life. And so I went to school in Rochester. I went to grade school, and I went to a high school that was very I don't know, gave me a very unique experience, I think. It was half white, half black, half Italian, half Eastern European, Europeans, I mean, Hungarians and Slavics and all those people. I mean, it was half of everything. It was a real mixture of kids. And we really seemed to get together well, and we were all mixed up, and it was a unique experience.
I bet.
Yeah, and my upbringing was very religious Jewish. My parents were that way, and after high school, they sent me off to college. So the reason I picked architecture was I came 11th grade or 12th grade, whenever you have to kind of decide what you're going to do, I chose mechanical engineering. Went down to talk to my guidance counselor, and he said, mechanical engineering, it looks like you did well in your art class. And I said, yeah. He said, well, you should be an architect. I said, well, what's an architect? He said, well, I really don't know, but I think it combines engineering and architecture. I'll look it up. I'll let you know. So about 3 days later, this was without Google or anything, he looked it up, called me down to his office again. He said, you know, I was right. You should go into architecture because it's partly art and creativity, and it's partly mechanical engineering and other engineering and scientific, and it would be a good field for you. So I applied to architecture schools back east, and I got accepted to 2 schools, but I chose Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Just 5 hours from home. It was on Lake Erie instead of Lake Ontario, and it was that was an interesting education too. We were in a class of the School of Architecture was very small. There were 30 kids that started out in each class, and they graduated about 14 every year. And so it was a small school with no Cal Poly or anything, but it was a unique, different experience. So I have to tell you one thing that recently happened. Our class got together for a 50th anniversary, a reunion. And nobody wanted to do it through the college because we were all kind of disconnected from the college. We were in architecture. It was a whole different area, a whole different department. It was like a fraternity and sorority. There were some girls in it, even in our day. So we got together a month after the college had their 50th reunion, and there were 13 kids that showed up, and it was like, I didn't recognize any of them, but once they talked and I heard their voices, I knew who they were. And, over the weekend, we got familiar again with each other, and it was really nice. One of our professors even was still around. He's recently passed away, but he joined us for a dinner, and it was very nice to see him. And we've gotten together since on Zoom, but they're threatening to have another reunion, which I don't know that I can put up with. But anyhow, that's another story. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to share is out of those kids, old men, after the reunion, I got an email. Well, maybe I shouldn't share this.
No, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
got an email from one who was very positive about Trump, and it really shocked me. Then I got an email from one of the kids that I was really friendly with. I thought he was one of my best friends in college, that couldn't make the reunion. And he sent me an email and said he'd really like to talk. And so we went back and forth a couple times. Finally, he called me up. And he is a black kid from Tuskegee, Alabama.
Oh, wow.
And I always thought of him in college as a friend and a kind of an equal to all of us. You know, we're all in the same boat, all doing the same thing, staying up late at night, all night, doing all-nighters and doing projects and things. And he starts talking to me about his experience in college and how separated he felt and how ignored he was by teachers sometimes, and kids in class and big lecture halls would, you know, move away from him when he sat down. And I mean, it completely threw me. I had no idea what he was going through that whole time that he was in college, and we were friends. And so I think that covers my growing up and going to college. So I got through Case Western Reserve in fair style, and I went to work for a large design build firm in Cleveland, the Austin Company. And when I went there, a lot of the kids that I went to school with were working there. And the reason it attracted the college kids is, at the time, this was 1969, you could get a draft deferment working for them because they were doing a lot of defense work. So I went to work for them, and you know, the first thing they said on the first day, all the people I knew there said, "You better sign up for the architecture exam." This was in September I graduated. "You better sign up for the architecture exam because in December is the last time you can take it without 3 years of experience." So I said, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." So I signed up for it, and in December I took the exam. I passed whatever it was, 5 out of the 7 parts, and so I was on my way. I'm glad I did that, because if I would have waited 3 years, I would have never remembered all that stuff. I mean, I learned by osmosis, and it's got to be fresh in my mind. So after about a year or so, I finally got my license there. So I was on my way. Stuck around Cleveland for 3 or 4 years. I had a project that a fellow that I knew from kind of a, you know, what you call it, a teacher's aide or a assistant professor or whatever, got a research grant to do a research project, architectural research project in a state mental hospital in Cleveland. And this was like a one flew over the cuckoo's nest state hospital, really. And so they were going to spend a year tracking, designing improvements to the wards inside the hospital, and then tracking with a group of psychologists the change of behavior of residents in the wards. And so I spent a year with them doing their media stuff, trying to video with huge cameras, you know, with the VCR tapes, and taking 35 millimeter photographs and writing certain elements of the project and trying to record it while they were doing it. So
was the premise of the project that the changes that were being made were going to improve the conditions for the patients? What was the goal of that project?
Of course, that was the premise of the project, but the psychologists were there, and there were other type of people there. I don't remember now, but they were to map and record the changes in the patients, the residents' behavior, to know if it was a positive or negative effect. The one project we did was to hang, I mean, this was bare, high-ceilinged halls that these people were living in and sleeping in. And one of the projects was to hang fabric banners from the ceiling, very colorful, and a lot of them in the ward, to muffle the sound. Number one was our main goal, to see if the sound improvement helped behavior, but the color, of course, was to maybe change their perception of the spaces. Another project we did was to design. We all spent time kind of cooperatively designing these, got what they call them, sleeping cubicles, I guess. You know, until we got there, this one ward, well, all the wards, you know, they had beds lined up against both walls, and people would march into the bed they got to that night, and that was the bed they slept in. If they didn't get to where they slept the last day and they left something there, too bad. And so we designed these cubicles, mostly out of particle board or plywood, that one of them had like a raised platform, maybe 6 inches high, and you know, might have been 8 by 8, 2 pieces of plywood, had a little wall around it, 3 feet high, had a bed built into it, and had a kind of enclosure and a roof even over that bed, which took up half the platform. And you know, that was theirs. They were all assigned a unit, and each one had something distinctive painted on it. And then the outside area on the platform that wasn't roofed had a desk built in and a chair, you know, just a bench to sit on and that kind of thing. And they each had their own private space. And so the psychologist, you know, that's what they were looking at, how these people changed, or how they received having the private space rather than the public dormitory. So that was the kind of project. So that project ended on a certain day. The funds ran out and was going to disband. And so the question I was married at the time, and I'm supposed to say to my beautiful wife, Linda, you know, what do we do? We had already lived in Cleveland as a couple for maybe 2 years after we got married. And we were both from Rochester. So do we move back to Rochester? We like Cleveland, but should we stay in Cleveland? And meanwhile, my brother, Sid, married my wife's sister. And their honeymoon was a trip across the country in an old car that my father had bought them for a wedding gift, but it was already about 6 or 7 years old. We got one too for our wedding gift. And their honeymoon was, he built a huge plywood box, put it on the roof. They put all their stuff in a plywood box and in the back seat in the trunk, and they drove across the country to a job that he had already set up in Los Angeles with the city. And so they were in Los Angeles. So should we move to Rochester? Should we stay in Cleveland? And we get a call from them, why don't you come out and be with us? So that's what we finally decided to do. And we came out to LA. When we were in Cleveland still, we bought a house for $23,800. Okay? And we had to decide between that house and another house that was $24,200, $400 more. We decided we couldn't afford the extra payments, so we took the less expensive one, which was a wonderful, beautiful house. And my brother calls us and tells us he bought a house in LA for $25,000. And we couldn't imagine what palace this was that he bought. And so we came out to visit him once, and we see this house, and it looked like, I don't know, people wouldn't even have bought it as a summer cottage on one of the Finger Lakes in New York State. I mean, it was small. And it was in LA, and anyhow, we moved to LA and we rented a place. We were in sticker shock. And we settled in with them, and then we found someplace to rent. And 3 months later, he got a job in Santa Barbara. That he always wanted to move up here, so they moved to Santa Barbara. left us in LA for 7 years. I got a job with an engineer, a structural engineer, whose title was Jasper and Associates, Architecture and Structures, I guess. Architecture and Engineering. He was a structural engineer. So anyhow, they moved to LA and we were stuck down there. For 7 years, I kept going up to Santa Barbara, and no, you have too much experience. No, you have too little experience. You know, I could never find a job up there. So in LA, I was working for this engineer, and I decided I should get my license, reciprocal license in California. So I went to the boards to get, all I had to do was an oral interview. Went to the board meeting in a hotel near the airport in LA and talked to them for maybe 10 minutes. And they said, well, what kind of work have you been doing in California? So I unrolled the drawings that I did for Jasper and Associates. And they looked at the drawing and they looked at the title block and it said Architecture and Engineering. And they said, oh, who's the architect? And I said, well, I am. And they said, you're not an architect here yet. And they spent the whole interview talking about Jasper and Associates. Should we investigate him? You know, he's calling himself an architect. And he's not an architect. He doesn't have an architect working for him. I'm trying to whistle out of it. And finally, they didn't ask me anything about architecture, but they gave me my license. So anyhow, I worked for this fellow for about 5 years, and that was interesting. You know, it was just he and I in this office in downtown LA. One summer, they came. This camera crew came to the office. They wanted to use it. It was in an old house, and camera crew wanted to use the house front door for a scene they wanted to film from Beretta, that cop show. And so they were filming it around the neighborhood, and we had a nice front door. Well, we didn't have a nice front door. So he agreed, and anyhow, they came and they didn't like our front door, actually. They came and they took the door out, they put in their own door, which was more of our door was a flat slab, hardcore door or solid core door, and they wanted more of a paneled residential look. And the scene took 5 minutes at the most to film. They spent a day before prepping the place, putting in old tires in front of the place, garbage, making it look trashier than it was. And they spent a day preparing it. They spent 5 minutes filming it. They came back the next day and they took down the door. They put them in our old door. They took away all the trash. They the inside of the door, when you closed it, it had gotten dirty during the process. They insisted on painting the door inside. Anyhow, all right, so that's the story about life in LA.
What brought you up to Santa Barbara? How did you get up to Santa Barbara? All that.
I went from working for him to working for an architect in LA and or in Santa Monica, actually. And after a while there, I got tired of that, and I decided to go on my own. And so I opened an office in our house in LA that we had bought by that time. I don't want to tell you money anymore because that hurt. Anyhow, but I went on my own. I was doing projects in the neighborhood. We were living around the airport, and my brother, meanwhile, moved from Santa Barbara. He got a job with an engineer in Solvang, California. Mm-hmm. You know where Solvang is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I for a minute there, I couldn't remember if you were on the East Coast or the West Coast. But anyhow, so he got a job in Solvang. So one of the jobs he did was for a developer in Solvang. And the developer actually, the first job I did up here in the area was from a developer I knew uh, in LA that bought a piece of property outside of Solvang, wanted to do a spec home and asked me to do it. So I did the spec home. I got that done up here and built. And then my brother got this developer who wanted to do a office building right in town in Solvang, hired me to do an office building. And so I did that. While I think after I did that and it was built, you know, I started getting more work up here. I decided, what the heck, I'm in business for myself in LA. We'll come up to Solvang, and we moved up to San Ynez actually, and bought a house. Another issue, but anyhow, and we've been here ever since. After you know, I worked for a while. I spent a year coming up from LA to Solvang area, living in my brother's house. My wife would stay home with the kids, and I still can't remember any of that. Where I slept in his house, where, you know, what eating was like. I can't remember a thing of it, but I know I did it anyhow. So after a year, we you know, during the summer, we moved up here, bought a house, rented a house, actually, and you know, took the kids. We're done with school, and the kids started school in the fall in San Ynez, and then we bought a house in San Ynez, and so they stayed in the same school district and everything else. But one thing I have to tell the young architects about my first project up here. When the first project, that speculative house I did, I came up to submit for plan check. And of course, I had been dealing with LA City and LA County, and they already had pretty tight plan check going on. You know, you handed your drawings in, how long would it take, you know, a month or 6 weeks or whatever, and then you'd pick up your plan check and your plan checklist, and you do your corrections, you take them back, and you know, you might get your permit on the first try or maybe not. So I come up here to my first plan, you know, submittal for plan check, and I go into the building department, and this guy who remained friends until the day he died, Charlie Clark, was taking care of the building department. You know him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he comes to the counter, and he opens the drawings, and he kind of goes through them, you know, for 3 or 4 pages, and then lost interest. And then he fills out some paperwork, and I said, how long will this take? And he said, you know, don't be impatient. You know, I'll write this up, and you'll have it in 5 minutes. So I said, okay, but I was asking how long the plan check would take. He was talking about giving me the permit. And
Why, how things have changed.
When I finally figured out he was going to give me the permit, I said, well, you didn't check the drawings. He said, I looked at them. He said, it's your name on the drawing, not mine. You're going to get sued, not me. So here's the permit. And that was it.
Oh, that's great.
That stayed that way for a good many years.
Wow.
But like all good things, that goes away. Anyhow.
So when was that you moved up to Santa Barbara? What year was that? Or Solvang?
Yeah, in 81.
81, okay.
To here. And so you know, I opened an office up here. My brother, shortly after I opened the office, the engineer he was working for retired and left town. So he opened his own office, and we shared offices for maybe four years after that, 5 years. And we got our first office was on the second floor of the City Hall building. And we, somewhere on, it wasn't Craigslist at the time, but somewhere I found a bunch of 5-foot high office panels, modular office panels. And, you know, we divided up this office into his space and my space, and his space into a couple spaces, my space into a couple spaces. My wife worked for me, his wife worked for him, and, you know, it was a family affair. And, you know, we did that. Then finally, I hired a draftsman, so I had to take a few more panels and set up a drafting room. And then he hired a draftsman, and I hired another draftsman here. Anyhow, then we moved from the City Hall building to the office building that I had designed for that first developer. And, you know, we took up one space, and we again reconfigured everything and divided it up. And, well, I think we did have 2 spaces at that time, and one was for my brother and I, the executive suite, and the other was for the draftsman. They had a room, a long, narrow room that we had drafting tables put in and that kind of thing. And everything, of course, was being done by hand. This would be 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. Then there was an accountant that worked upstairs from us that both my brother and I had, you know, dealings with, had hired to do our accounting. There was an attorney in the building that we didn't hire. And there was a realtor in the building at the office next door. And then there was an attorney in town in Solvang that we knew. And so the attorney, the realtor, the accountant, my brother, and I decided we would build our own building. So a piece of property came up. We bought it. We, you know, we all put in money. We formed a partnership. We bought it. I designed the building. My brother did the civil engineering. That was his forte, civil engineering. And the lawyer did his lawyering. The accountant did his accounting. And the realtor, I guess he got us the property, then sat back and enjoyed it. Anyhow, so we built this building in Solvang, an office building, and with a lot of extra space to rent out. We're very fortunate. We rented everything out, and we've kept it rented all these years, 30 years later. And my brother had his own office. I had my own office, and everything was fine.
That's the office building on Alamo Pintado, right? Isn't that where you are? Yeah. Yeah.
So when we were getting toward framing the building, everybody wanted to pick out their office space. So I said I would suffer and take this space up on the 3rd floor in the corner, which had beautiful views of everything. And nobody realized that until it was too late. But so that worked out well. We each had our own space across the hall from each other. We still did some work together. But that was it. Our practice was mainly in the Solvang, San Ynez, Buellton area. Smaller projects, anything from a garage to an addition. And then we started getting jobs doing commercial buildings in Solvang, and then some commercial buildings in San Ynez, houses, larger ranches for people. And last maybe 6-7 years of my practice, I started working for with the Housing Authority of Santa Barbara County, doing apartment buildings. Did apartment project in Los Alamos, one in Lompoc, one in Buellton, and those were an interesting experience.
So you've done a little bit of everything in architecture, it sounds like.
Everything I claimed, and I wanted to be a kind of a country architect, doing whatever came in the door, I would do. And that was a good and bad decision, I guess. But,
Why do you say that?
well, I never felt I became an expert in anything, something I could, after I retired, become a consultant at. I never I didn't do apartments long enough to really know the details and the ins and outs of it. And by the time I did those, I was old enough, wise enough to know that I shouldn't BS my way through it. So, but I enjoy doing everything.
Yeah. Well, you're a Renaissance man. That's what you are. You're a Renaissance man. Is there, of any of those projects, David, is there anyone that you're particularly proud of? Something that you look back and say, that was my favorite project, or I enjoyed this part of that project?
I hate to say it, but my favorite one still is, well, there's several favorites, but the one I'm proudest of is a little mini park that I did maybe 5 years before I retired, in Solvang, next to a public restroom building that I did a couple years before that. And it's just an area that was left over between a commercial building, a Burke Holmes Bakery, and this public restroom. And with the area left over that we made a little park out of it, a lot of seating area for people and covered trellises to shade people. And, I think that's my favorite. I've done some interesting buildings in town. For a while there, I was the public restroom king of Solvang. I did 2 of their public restrooms. I did a building I did maybe 5 or 6, I don't know how many, Danish style buildings, both Danish style, in town. By the way, the office building I built was not in the center of town, but was in town. And at the time I did it in 1978, I think, there was no city of Solvang, no Board of Architectural Review, no nothing. And but everything already had developed in the Danish design, and it was all spearheaded by one architect, Earl Peterson. I don't know if you knew him or remember him.
Of him, I know of him. Yeah.
He lived in Solvang, and after World War II, he decided that up until World War II, Solvang was just a backwater California town with Danish bakeries, because it really has authentic Danish roots from the time it was founded in 1911. And so, but the architecture was nothing like it is today. It was just whatever any other or California town was, that's what Solvang was. And this fellow, as I understand it, Earl Peterson, and I think somebody else with him, decided they would remodel a couple buildings and give them the Danish look, the half timbering and the steep pitched roofs and the thatch. Well, they use shingles roofs, and they did it on. You probably know if I told you, on the east side of Copenhagen. And one year, I don't know what year, but shortly after the war is when this happened. Look magazine came up and did an article on Solvang. And the picture on the cover was that side of LSL with the village Danish dancers dancing around in costume and everything. So that's how Solvang got started.
I have never heard that.
Yeah, and all the people down Copenhagen, when they wanted to do stuff on Copenhagen, they said, "You keep your Danish crap over there. We don't want it. You keep your tourists." And it was still a barbershop, the rest of the town, barbershop, bank, realtor, bakeries, billiard hall, whatever was down there was all for the town. And eventually they made the conversion and saw the light.
I saw the dollars, I would imagine, all the tourists coming. Oh,
yeah. But anyhow, that's my understanding of how it got started. But I think part of that was a fellow named Ferd Sorensen, who was a craftsman from Denmark, and he had been, at some point, he was knighted by the Queen of Denmark, who was Sir Ferd Sorensen. Anyhow, the reason I'm telling you all this is because on my first building I did in town, that office building, the developer wanted something stark raving modern, he said. That's how he said it. And I said, you can't do that. It's Solvang. It must have to be, I can do whatever I want. It's my property. I can do whatever I want. So I did a building for him, a 3-story building, flat roof, all this stuff. And he said, oh, that looks great. I brought him up drawings one weekend, and he said, let me look these over. So he called me up a week or two later. He said, David, we're going to have to make this a little Danish. What happened? Well, there was a group that got together every day, once a week, I don't know, of the old timers that, well, this was 78 already. So that get together for coffee, and they pass judgment on what gets done in Solvang. And so I showed them the drawings, and they said if we did what he wanted, they would make sure nobody rented. And so he gave in, and we did a little Danish. When he built it, he left out a little bit of the Danish that I had put in, which bugged me since it was built. But anyhow, that was the beginning. Then the next commercial building I did was in downtown Solvang, and it was Danish, or Danish style as they call it here. And they built it. Everything was fine. Everything was going fine. I go there when they're plastering it, and they're putting up the half timbering. The half timbers aren't wood. They found out very early that the wood, when you use actual wood, the wood shrunk up in our weather, separated from the plaster, and caused all kinds of water problems. So they had already by this time developed a way to do the plastering on the wall. Then they would add bands of plaster over the stucco and texture them to look like timber.
Oh, really? So all that stuff isn't real? Huh.
Not real. Even putting the little holes in it, they'll make it look like there's pegs. So they developed that. So anyhow, I go look at the building when they're plastering it, and none of the half timbering is like I drew it. And they had a lot of it done on one side of the building. And I said, no, you got it all wrong. You're going to have to take this. And they said, oh, no, it's fine. Ferd came by and showed us how to do it. And so this fellow, who I'd not met to that point, came by and told them how the half timbering would work and look.
Oh, because he was Danish? Is he?
He's Danish, the craftsman, he was the expert.
Okay.
So I went to see him, and he was really a nice guy. And
Peterson, or what? What was his last name? Do you remember?
Ferd Sorensen.
Oh, Sorensen. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he explained to me what I had done wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and I let him do it. It came out well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, go ahead.
But one building that I'm proud of that I did is a replica of a building in Denmark, in Copenhagen. It's called the Rundetårn, the Round Tower. And it was built in 1642 by King Christian IV. And it's a round tower 90-something feet tall, and up the inside of it is a spiral ramp that the king would supposedly drive his coach up. And at the top of the tower was they built an observatory for, now I can't remember his name, famous astronomer. Anyhow, so I did some work for a fellow that owned a building with a partner. He didn't like the partner, and they wanted to split up. But the partner wanted the building, he wanted the building. So what they did was, after a fire, this was not caused by anybody, but there was a fire in the building. So they decided they would tear down the part that was damaged, would split the building in two, and one partner would take one partner would take the other, and everybody was happy. And so one partner hired me. He wanted to do a replica of this Rundturm in Solvang, and he wanted to put it as part of the remodel of his side of this building, which already had the big windmill on Alisal was the front part of the building. And so we decided to do the Rundturm in back, round tower. And that was an interesting project. He didn't send me to Denmark for research. I had been there to Denmark a few years before this, and I didn't see that building, but I had taken a lot of pictures of stuff that we saw, and was really anxious to do this. So I started doing research and looking up history in the books and everything, and I wrote to whatever the organization was, I knew at the time, the AIA of Copenhagen, if they had any records of the building, any possible original drawings that I could get copies of, or any history or whatever. And they sent me back some copies of drawings, small, reduced ones, small ones, but they were mostly modern ones, but they were helpful. It gave me the proportions and everything on paper, and these were to scale. So we designed this, and we weren't going to put a ramp up the middle, but there's 3 stories in there, and we knew the first floor would be commercial. The second floor for the owner would hopefully be commercial, but by this time, all the second floor commercial spaces were not doing well throughout the town, and people wouldn't go upstairs. In fact, the first building I did where Ferg took his hand with the timbering, incorporated a glass enclosed elevator up front that we thought would help get the tourists up to the second floor, but that never worked either. Anyhow, so we did this tower building, which really came out very well. And looks well. It's kind of tucked in the back courtyard, which is kind of how you would see the real tower, looking down a narrow street and it rising up. And so it came out well.
Where is that, David?
Where's the one in Solvang?
Yeah.
Yeah, on Copenhagen, the big windmill?
Yes.
It's right behind there in that same building. It's connected.
Check that out. Yeah.
So the two interesting things about that, one is that the real one is made out of brick, and I didn't want to get involved, and the owner didn't want to get involved with having half-size brick made. This building was actually a third the size of the original. Half-size brick, and getting involved with masonry and all that. So by this time, I had already met a fellow that lived, I think, in Ojai, that was doing a lot of buildings around town. He did brick and plaster, the same way that you do the half timbering and plaster. he'd take the scratch coated, not scratch coated. What's a I can't even remember what the
brown coat. The brown coat.
yeah. All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
The brown coat, and then put another coat on top of it, and then score it out. He had tools made with curved blades that were that wide that you could score a joint, and then he would put a color coat on top of that, a real dark red, and then he had developed all kinds of oxides to put the color to give it a kind of a weathered look. I mean, this guy was an artist, truly an artist with this stuff, and he did several buildings around town, and so he did all the brickwork. And the funny thing was that he'd start at the top, of course, to keep all the runoff water from running over his finished product. So you see this brickwork around the top of the building, working its way down instead of going down up like you would normally see. So anyhow, he was a very interesting guy, a real artist. Anyhow, so that's interesting. Then on the tower, up at the top of the tower, there's an inscription that I read up on, and it was supposed to be a riddle that the king put on the tower. And everybody was supposed to solve the riddle, and everybody's best guess about what the riddle is guide the wisdom and learning, O God, in the heart of King Christian IV. And King Christian IV, you can make out because it's the bottom, and it has a heart, a red heart with a crown wrapped around it, and four in Roman numerals, and 1642, of course, the date it was built. And then there's a couple of Danish words and a sword up there. You'll see it. And then there's a kind of a hieroglyphic between the two Danish lines and the crown and the heart. And when we were doing it, I always thought it looked kind of Hebrew. And I thought that couldn't be Hebrew. It must be some kind of, Norse runes or something. Anyhow, this fellow did an exact replica of that. Amazing. On the building. And, I think a jewelry shop moved in down below, somebody I knew, and, other businesses moved in. And one day I get a call from the woman that owned the jewelry shop. David, is that Hebrew up there? I had somebody come in and say that looked like Hebrew up there. So I took it to a rabbi at a synagogue that we belonged to, and he was kind of a linguist. He said, yeah, that's just a decorative script of Hebrew. And, once I looked at it and he told me it was Hebrew, it was definitely Hebrew, and it was one of the words that's used for God. And, and I checked around, and in fact, many years later, there was an article in Watchtower magazine from the Seventh-day Adventist. Mm-hmm. There was an article about that tower in Denmark was in the article, picture of it, and several gates over churches had that Hebrew for God over them in Hebrew. And the article is about how these noble men throughout Scandinavia, I guess Europe too, would study Hebrew so that they could read the Bible in its original language and know what it said.
Wow.
So it's possible.
Yeah.
But until she called me, I just dismissed it as some kind of symbol.
Well, David, we're going to have just another 10
Oh,
maybe
oh,
15
so,
minutes.
I'm sorry.
But one thing I wanted to ask you, and then it sounds like you had something you wanted to say. Did you want to say
Yeah.
that first? Okay. So I know that you've been very involved with AIA Santa Barbara, and I know about the scholarship, the architectural scholarship
Mhm.
competition that you've done for many years. And so could you speak a little bit to that topic and how you got involved with that and how you came up with the idea? And
Well, I hate to say it, but it wasn't with AIA, it was with the foundation.
oh, the Scholarship Foundation.
No, the Architectural Foundation.
Architectural Foundation, that's okay. They're kind of related, so no, that's fine. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So could you tell us about the scholarship program through the Architectural Foundation?
As long as I can talk favorably about the Architectural Foundation on
Yeah.
this meeting, I'm okay. Anyhow, so yeah, well, now it's 30 years ago. My kids were in high school, and they were involved in all kinds of acting and singing and instrument playing and that, and they had jazz band to be in and performances to perform and contests to do. And I don't know why, but I started thinking about the kids in the drafting program and how they had no way to strut their stuff, to show their stuff. So I must have heard about somebody else doing it. Oh no, Don Sharp,
Oh, mm-hmm.
an architect in Solvang, had done a competition. I don't remember how it worked, but he'd done a competition in Santa Barbara schools for many years. He had stopped doing it. So I thought, well, I'll take up the sword.
Mm-hmm.
So I did this thing, but it wasn't a scholarship. It was mainly a competition
Mm-hmm.
for high school students in the North County. Because
Right.
I kept going to the high school in Santa Ynez, talking to the drafting teacher, and no, I don't want to get involved with that. It turned out that he didn't want anybody coming in his class and telling his kids what design was. He wasn't sure what it was. So, and so, but finally I went to the education office, the county education office, the ROP program, regional occupation program, that in several schools in the county up north. And I told them about my idea about this competition, and they liked it, and they said, all our schools will participate in this. And so we had 60 to 100 kids show up every year.
Mm-hmm.
At first, they did the project in their own schools during their own time. They had 2 weeks to do it, and then we had judges come in and judge them. But after a while, it developed into a charrette that all the kids would come to Santa Ynez High School. From then, we opened it to the whole county, and do a charrette for a day. We'd give them in the morning. We'd give them a project, um, a design program, and they'd have 6 hours, 7 hours to do their design and do their drawings and leave the school. We'd set up long tables in the gym, and they would do that. We'd bring tools and whatever. And then we'd have judges come in after they were done and judge their work. We'd pick out the 12 finalists, and the following Saturday, the 12 finalists would come in and they would show their drawing to a jury of 4 other architects. And we always tried to get an educator in there, somebody from Cal Poly or City College. And they would look at everybody's work, and each student would have to present their work. The student would have time to talk to the judges. The judges would have time to talk to the students and discuss with them about their work, and then they would score them. And at the end of that Saturday morning, we'd figure out who the winners were based on the scores and give out prizes. And that's how it's gone for 30 years. And now I was doing it for myself. By myself, the foundation was involved. The AIA was involved for several years. buying books that we gave out for prizes one year, but they were involved several years. And we give out cash prizes to the kids, and so hopefully some kind of award. And the kids learn a little bit about creating a building. They learn, if they learn nothing else, they learn what they can do in 7 hours by themselves. A teacher early on came up to me, after the judging, after the juried review, we call it, on Saturday, and said, the best part of this competition isn't the designing and all that stuff. It's giving the kids a chance to talk to adults about their work, and having to, in some cases, defend it, or show people how great it was. And it's amazing every year how comfortable the kids are doing it.
Well, I'm very impressed at the comprehensive approach and the rigor, because it's almost like they're an architectural school to a certain extent. But then,
it's the state boards all over again doing that charrette.
And then giving them the opportunity to be exposed to architects and engineers and builders and talk to them. What a phenomenal opportunity for these kids. So good for you.
I believe Dennis was a judge once.
Uh-huh.
When construction was one of the issues in the design program, we've had other people come in that were appropriate to the project, other than architects. But we've always managed to get at least one, if not two, in recent years, professors from Cal Poly, and a couple architects, whatever.
So you're still doing it? The program still continues?
The program still continues. After 27 years, I handed it over to Jeremy White at the foundation, and he's took it on, and wow, he's done a fabulous job. This year, we had the design charrette right at the beginning of the virus thing. It was in March. It wasn't even the beginning, but nobody knew how bad it was on that Tuesday. We had arranged to have the Saturday review at Dunn School up here in the valley, which has a beautiful library room that we had used once before that worked out perfectly. And during the charrette, the contact person at Dunn School came over to the charrette and said, "I have some bad news for you. Dunn School is closing down on Thursday, and nobody can use the campus. We're canceling our parents' weekend, which was the same weekend as the design review. We're canceling this big event, this big fundraiser. We're closing down." And so we had to look for other spaces. And we found another space at the elementary school in Los Olivos. But by the time from Tuesday, the charrette, until Friday, we decided we shouldn't even have the thing at, and Jeremy took it on, him being a professor at Cal or at the UCSB, said, "We'll do it remotely." So the kids were all asked to do a 4-minute, which is what their time limit is, to describe what they did, and then we had 12 of those. And the judges were all sent the 12 explanations from the kids to review with the kids' drawings. And the only thing missing, the biggest thing missing, is the kids' discussion with the judges. We couldn't have. Now with Zoom and everything, maybe next year, if we have to do it that way, we could do it with Zoom and somehow work it out. But whatever, Jeremy pulled this together and it worked out flawlessly, except one of the finalists was a Danish exchange student from San Ynez High School. They have a class of Danish kids that come over every year. And on Thursday, she was sent home to Denmark. So I got an email from her, that I can't do this because I'm in Denmark. And we said, oh, yes, you can. And she did, what she had to do. And, got to the judging.
Oh, that's
And
great.
another student from Dunn School was sent home to LA, so he wasn't around. Even if we would have had a live review, he might have come back from LA, but she was long gone. So anyhow.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question for you, and then you can tell me anything else that I haven't covered that you had hoped that I would cover. But I just was wondering, David, what would you like to be remembered for in your career, in your life? Is there something that you would really hope that you would be remembered for? Have you ever thought about that?
My 5 grandchildren. No, I don't. I'm not sure that there's any, architectural thing that, I think I added to the Solvang environment, the Solvang background, and I hope I'm appreciated for that. But the family and everything is what sets me on fire.
That's what's really important. Yep.
I've been retired for 5 years, and I don't know if it was the more code issues and the more, I was totally disappointed for years. I shouldn't admit this to you, that in the 70s, in the 60s even, I was a big, really wanting to get involved with sustainability and energy efficiency and all that. And I got into architecture. I of course went through school and was indoctrinated somewhat in that, although our school, I don't think any school at that point was really heavily involved in that. Although we did have Ian McHarg come and talk to gave a lecture once for our 100-student school, which was very inspirational. But I never got involved in that as a professional. I never took the interest, I never took the time, I never took that as a main emphasis. And I'm very disappointed by that. And whereas I should have, would have, could have.
Well, is that something that you would encourage young architects today to have as a priority?
Definitely. For years, I encouraged, once we got started on this competition, I didn't really do it to encourage kids to study architecture. I did it to give them an insight into designing something, taking something out of midair, putting it in 2 dimensions and letting somebody else see it in 3 dimensions and that whole process. And but the 2 things that I've always told kids that have come to me for advice is, number 1, if you go to architecture school, that's fine, but study business and study energy efficiency as a subject, not mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, but energy efficiency. I don't know how you can do it. Probably have to put your own program together, but make that a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I managed to convince one young lady who went to Cal Poly. She went and got a 1-year master's degree in business. I don't know how much she did in energy, but after she got her architecture degree, she got her 1-year degree in business. But I mean, that's the crux of the whole thing.
Yeah.
The hell with all the things that described a building before. I always found Excuse me.
Sure.
It might still talk to me, but I always felt, even when I was in college, that the way buildings were described in architectural history books or by architectural historians or architectural critics was really not how buildings should be or be thought of or act, or, you know, energy efficiency being one. And it's not the appearance from the exterior, which is easy to photograph and put in books and everything, but it's how a person experiences going through the building. And you know, that's what architecture is. How the, you know, of course it's divided up into periods and Romanesque and Gothic and everything, but it's how the building is used and experienced is what it's all about. And so,
I like that.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's my thought of the day.
Yep. Well, it looks like Tara has jumped back in.
Tara, you missed all the excitement.
What a great interview.
All right.
Are you guys done? Or I don't want to interrupt if you...
So I think we're running out of time, no?
Karen? Yeah.
Well, I think we covered the questions that I wanted to ask, but whether David had any, I thought what he just finished up with his words of wisdom for young architects and what the essence of and the importance of what architecture and buildings are all about is really, really nice. So, you know, one thing I was going to say to you, David, was when you started this interview, you said how you went to high school in Rochester. Your high school was multi-ethnic, multiracial. You all got along. And one thing that the AIA is talking about right now, actually Robert Uli is, and Matthew Bouzoulet, who's the president, Robert's the past president, but there's going to be a meeting on Thursday for AIA to talk about this topic, what's going on with George Floyd and all the protests, and really what can the architectural community do in response, or how can we help to move the issue forward? And so I don't know if that'd be something that you would be interested in being a part of, or I just want to let you know that that's happening, and you might have some wisdom.
Is this a Zoom thing?
Well, it's a board meeting first, and I don't know where it's really going to go. But you brought it up right at the very beginning, and so if that would be a topic, I don't know where it's going to go. Tara, you might have more insight on this, but if that would be something that you, in your...
I am trying, especially after my talk with my black friend.
Yes. Oh, that's right. That's so right. Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
A friend.
Yes.
And he has said that I am his friend, but I have been trying to find out how I could somehow participate in getting things right.
Yeah.
I don't know that they will. I don't know that they'll ever be there, but
I hope to God we don't get it right. But Tara, David, I don't know if you heard this, but David was talking about an architect friend that he went to school with who contacted him, and they just had a conversation recently where he said, and this was one of David's very good friends, and he said during college, said, you know, every day I experienced racism. Somebody would I'd sit down and they would move away or whatever, but it's just, I mean, and it gives me the chills actually, because you didn't know that, and you didn't, and we don't experience that. We don't know what that's like. I mean, anyway,
yeah, that's something that we're definitely starting to focus on. And as Karen said, we're having a board meeting on Thursday, and we regret being a bit slow to pick up on the response to the whole thing, as the whole world is.
Well, I saw something on an email from the national AIA.
Right. They made a statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, David, if you have any ideas about how we can move forward and, just make a difference, we can, and I'll definitely, Karen or I will, be back in touch with you after the board meeting to see,
Okay.
if there's a way you can be involved, or just let you know what we're talking about.
I have nothing concrete as far as architecture and racism go. I read the article about, or from the National, and I didn't quite follow where they were headed, or if they knew where they were headed. But I definitely feel like I need to do something.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether it's through AIA or get the vote out or whatever.
Yeah, the vote. Oh my God.
Well, got to get the vote out. That's for sure. Well, David, any last thoughts, or have you shared what you had hoped to share?
Well, I wasn't hoping to share anything. I didn't know where this would go. I didn't think I would have anything to say. But I started to tell you in the end, retiring, the thing about energy efficiency and sustainability, not doing my part in that, and things getting so involved with the code and plan checks and the difficulties that it just became not fun anymore. And so I retired, and I'm having fun. I'm doing I go to my shop every day in the backyard, and I make sawdust, and I do what I do.
With your 5 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, without them, we were all scheduled in April to go to Massachusetts to visit with 3 of them, and we had to cancel that. And now we're trying to figure out how we'll ever get there, including renting an RV to drive.
Wow.
But then what do we do when we get there? So we have a couple up north in the Bay Area, but same problem.
Yeah.
I can't see going to see grandkids and not being able to hug them.
No.
So anyhow.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I hope we get past this. I hope we get past that.
Yeah.
David, I really appreciate your time and hearing your story.
Good.
And say hi to Sid. I remember when Sid would bring plans in to the counter regularly. So, and I 2 other things. When you're talking about Rochester, my dad, who was a psychiatrist, he went to medical school in Rochester.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think about that, and then I'll have to go up to Solvang and see your round tower. Yeah. So yeah. So
I've been thinking lately. I don't know why, but I know why. Because my friend from Tuskegee, when I first started talking to him, and he was trying to explain, he explained that he came from a small town of 10,000 people. Or 13,000. But 3,000 of them were from the University of Alabama in Tuskegee or whatever, a small town. So I started thinking of Rochester, which is not a big city, but when we grew up there, we thought it was the center of the universe. I mean, it had Kodak. Who doesn't know Kodak? Then it had Xerox, but it was just unbelievable. Now it's a nothing.
Yeah. So Tara, do you want to tell David about sending things our way?
Yeah. So David, our plans for these interviews, because we're hoping to get to all our emeritus members, and we're going to actually post on our website at some point the videos.
Yeah.
So that everyone can share it, and eventually we may even do some editing and add like photos and background shots, maybe photos of projects that you worked on, or if you're in the local paper. If you want to send me any material that you have like that, we can just keep it on file to be used in the future. So you know, with your projects or as a young man, with your family, any press articles or plans or just anything you think's interesting, feel free to email that to me.
I'll see what I can find.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing is, I sent you, I think, via email a release, which
Yeah, I saw that last night. I forgot to do that.
that's okay. If you could yeah, just sign that and send it back, so that gives us the rights to kind of use the material.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Hey, can I ask either one of you? The university, UCSB, has an archive of architectural drawings.
Yes, it does.
What's their guideline to taking architectural?
So their selection is, how to say, some of the more exposed, the architects who've been highly successful, whatever.
Okay.
And
All right.
however, we have the AIA Santa Barbara oversees the county archives, and we have been collecting, plans of older architect members.
Yeah.
If you would like to donate them to the archives, we're happy to hold them there for you. I'm not sure what, the future of them would be, but.
Are you looking for originals or prints?
Whatever you want to give at this point. It's really, something that,
I have all my originals from 1960 something in a shed in the backyard. And sooner or later, I got to get rid of them, but I really don't want to throw them out.
No, exactly. So yeah, I can.
Originals.
Archives right now it's not open as it used to be with the public hours. It's by appointment only. So I can link you up via email with Dennis Whelan, who's the current manager there.
Oh.
And maybe you can make a time to drop them off. Or.
All right. I'd have to rent it. Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you both of you for doing this.
Thank you so much.
And for interviewing old architects.